the origin of life. I mean, this isn't something that I've ever studied formally. And I think the beginning and pretty much the ending of my education on the subject was reading Dawkins' The Selfish Gene. And it seemed somewhat cut and dry to me. The idea that, okay, in this primordial soup, you have complicated molecules forming over time, and as they mix and mingle, they become more complex, and there's competition for scarce resources that through natural selection, finally you end up with uh, proto-cellular organisms, something like that. And where exactly, I mean, there's a lot of question mark, like what happens here in the middle of things, and where is it that exactly in that process, if you still think that's a viable way of looking at things from a more global perspective, where is it that the more physicsy questions fit in, as well as the new sort of problem that you were talking about, this intersection between, I think you said, information and materiality fits in.
Yeah, so I think one question you could ask, which is a really important one, is there a difference between living things and non-living things? Because the process that, as you just described it, is very much feeling like a continuum in some sense. Like there's, some molecular order that emerges and it starts replicating, and then, there's some other structures that end up, you know, maybe having some symbiosis with that, and then, forming more and more complex things all the way up to the cell. And I do think it's really important to acknowledge that the origin of life transition probably is not one transition, first off. So, a lot of the way that I think about the origin of life right now is in terms of major transitions in molecular systems. So, if you think about the origin, we have cellular life, and in evolutionary biology, they'll talk about major transitions in evolution, single cells evolve to multicellular organisms, evolve to social systems with language. So there's like a hierarchy of processes that we can readily identify because we see all of the structure around us and we can classify that hierarchy. Within a cell, it's harder because the cell is one functioning unit and we don't really think about the autonomy of individual molecular systems within a cell. But probably the origin of life was some kind of cascade of major transitions in molecular organization, and the only relic we have of them now is what the modern cellular architecture is. So I think that's important, but also this idea of when you say life emerged, at what level are you talking about something being not alive versus life? And that question has been quite hard. And in some sense, that's what sets the standards of where in that hierarchy you say suddenly the original life has happened. Or maybe it's not suddenly, maybe it's gradually, but somehow you're in a non-living chemical soup and then you have a living system. And how do you actually measure and quantify that phenomena? I think this question has really been underappreciated. I think a lot of people think that you can just do replication and you'll get all the way there. So if we can just build a self-replicating polymer, it will be capable of evolution. Evolution will do all the work for us, and therefore we will be able to, explain the origin of life. And I think that's a really insufficient explanation for a number of reasons. Some of them are just like simple experimental things where if you have molecules and they're capable of replication and you put them in a test tube, you let them evolve, they don't tend to form more and more complex systems. They tend to actually simplify because the most efficient replicators tend to be smaller molecules and they'll outcompete the other molecules. So there's like a very famous experiment called Spiegelman's monster, which was really this replicating molecule that actually just demonstrated this, where like successive generations would get shorter and shorter because they would actually outcompete the longer sequences. So it's easy to kind of patch together this narrative of, we can get amino acids and nucleobases in prebiotic chemistry experiments. There's some other set of conditions that could string those together to make longer polymers. Those polymers could start replicating. There could be some other metabolism going on in some hydrothermal environment. Some lipids get together and make a set, like a membrane, and they all suddenly patch together and make a living thing. But it's really just a narrative. Like no one's demonstrated this. And no one is really articulated exactly when we would say this thing is alive. And it's also heavily based on the architecture of life as we know it. So it doesn't allow us any room for trying to anticipate other kinds of chemical systems that could be alive or other kinds of origin life transitions that could be possible. And so I think it's like, it reminds me a lot of like epicycle models of the early solar system. Like they work effectively. You can draw the orbits of the planets, you can add extra cycles to try to fit your data, and it is a coherent picture and a predictive model of certain pieces of planetary motion that we can put together and just say, like, this is the story. But it doesn't actually give you an explanation. It doesn't give you a generalization. And it doesn't allow you to see other things that could be part of the same regularity of nature. So if you have a model of epicycles for the early solar system, that's not going to explain anything to me about why balls are rolling down inclined planes on Earth. And it's not going to tell me about the possibility of planets around other stars or what their orbits are going to be like. You might be able to make some conjectures they should be circular, things, but like it's not at the same level as what we now appreciate with the theory of gravitation, where we have universal laws of motion and we understand that massive bodies attract each other, and this leads to a lot of the dynamics that we observe with planetary motion, and also explaining a lot of like things that happen with terrestrial motion. And so that kind of deeper explanation, I think, is really incredibly powerful for taking these sort of disparate observations and really putting them together to get a full picture. And I think the origin of life is a set of very disparate observations. We understand a lot about molecular biology. We understand a little bit about early Earth chemistry and geochemistry. We understand the building blocks of life are pretty readily made in meteorites and in the context of prebiotic chemistry experiments. But we don't know how much selection and evolution is necessary to get anything that we actually find in cells that's even like of moderate complexity. Those things are only demonstrated in prebiotic chemistry experiments, but those have a lot of selection in them also, because you have to purify the reagents. You have an experimenter designing the experiment to get a particular product. It might be something like ATP, which is, a primary energy carrier in the cell. And not like a super complex molecule, but we've never observed it abiotically. And you'll go in the origin of life literature, and some people will be claiming they can make it prebiotically. But if you look at the conditions of the experiment, it's an incredible amount of selection that has happened based on like prior history and contingency of selection of like prior experiments people have run. It's post-selected on the chemistry that we know evolved on life on Earth. So you're already imposing, looking for molecules that we know are part of known biology, and then asking for a path to produce them, where you're putting a lot of selective circumstances in to get that specific molecule. And if you think about like a planet before life and what was really going on, you have like these very messy geochemical environments with thousands of kinds of molecular species in any given sort of lump of material. So like if you look at meteorites, for example, meteorites are these pristine samples. These carbonaceous chondrites, for example, are pristine examples of the early solar system chemistry, and they have organic carbon in them. But no one's actually been able to fingerprint all the molecules that are present in these meteorites, because there's just thousands and thousands and thousands of them, and we don't even know what these molecules are. So on an early planet, there's just so much stuff happening, so much combinatorial diversity of potential structures. And you're asking for these very complex systems to be selected out of that combinatorial mess and fight against this kind of exploding process of creativity that happens in chemistry. Like, there's thermodynamics, and there's, catalysis, and like all of these processes happening. It's really hard to put that narrative that you just gave. It sounds easy in practice, but to actually do it experimentally and really understand the phenomena is quite hard. So those are some of the layers. There's like, we don't know the definition of life. We don't know like when we would measure success, like what is the level of complexity, or what is the level of molecular organization you say is life. And then we can do these simple experiments, but if we actually look at the real world, it's not at all simple like that. So how well are we modeling it? And are we putting too much selection and evolution and our own intelligence and agency into the experiments? And then even when we think about those things, we're not really actually thinking about the possibility space of any life. We're still narrowly restricted to life as we understand it, like life that happened to evolve on the early Earth. but not the possibilities of life writ large. And so I think there's a lot of things that we're missing. And actually, a lot of the work that I do, and I have a lot of colleagues that kind of think similarly about this, is that the origin of life is not just a thing that happened very distant in our planet, but it's a continual process that's happening on Earth. Every time you get a new combinatorial space that emerges, whether it's the possibility of having multicellular body plans or the combinatorics of language, it's kind of like a new origin of life process, because you're opening up this very huge potential space and you're asking, how does selection create structures that actually have any information content about each other, like the system itself, and can self-organize and persist in time? And these are actually not easy questions. I think people tend to gloss over them for simpler definitions, but if you dig down, they're quite hard and they're quite deep. And they're, I think, revealing something very fundamental that we're missing.